That's it. Another World Cup is done and dusted. And here at Zero Tackle, we're looking back at the 2022 installment and asking, what have we learned about International Rugby League? One of the biggest things that we've learned about International Rugby League is that the ranking system is absolutely cooked. Now, I'm not saying that Australia deserve to be number one heading into the tournament, but to have the world champions, the defending world champions at number 4 heading into their title defense seemed like a bit of an insult, didn't it? Obviously, teams and rankings have been challenged by the pandemic and the fact that nations haven't been able to play as much regular test international football as they once were able to. But to have Australia in 4th and New Zealand first, given their relatively unimpressive showings, yes, they stepped up for the semi-final, but before that, you couldn't tell me that they were favourites to win that tournament. But it's not just at the top end of the rankings either. It's not just in the top 4 where this confusion over how the rankings are being justified applies. If you look a bit further down the rankings, you'll see this year's World Cup finalist Samoa in 7th place. Now, of course, that is to be expected. Much of the revolution that saw them get to the final had not taken place up until just before the tournament started. But they're currently sitting in the world rankings on equal standing with Serbia. Serbia are the 8th ranked nation in World Rugby League. They didn't even appear at the World Cup. Why weren't Serbia at the World Cup? Because the 2 nations that they played in qualifying were at the World Cup, Greece and Scotland. Now, Scotland were absolutely terrible at this year's installment, and they still beat Serbia 86-0 in qualifying. And then Greece weren't much better, but they certainly played with a lot more heart than their Scottish friends. They beat Serbia 82-6. Now, what does this say about the 8th ranked nation in the world, that they can't get past nations who are much lower in the rankings than them, and they're getting beaten massively? The game against Greece, they were only allowed to play because Russia got disqualified from the qualifying tournament. Now, obviously, since then, Serbia has gone on to beat rugby league powerhouses like Bulgaria, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Russia again. But is that really enough to justify them jumping up into 8th place ahead of many nations who appeared at the World Cup? Now, the International Rugby League, the body who assigns these world rankings, says that there are 3 key criteria when it comes to establishing where teams rank. That is the recency of games played, the strength of the opponents that they played, and the margin of the result in the contest. And you can't tell me that Serbia, for all their wins over much more lowly ranked nations, should be sitting in 8th place after being absolutely hammered by 2 teams who were below them in the rankings and both went on to the World Cup while Serbia didn't. Now, I'm not trying to offend any Serbian fans we have here at Zero Tackle, but this ultimately, it points to a system that at both ends needs a hell of a lot of retooling and algorithmic change to be truly representative of the standings in International Rugby League. And of course, it would ultimately be more reflective if teams played more international football. As I said in the other video, Serbia played 4 times in 2021 in those games that I just mentioned against the lowly ranked nations, and they won all of them. It points to a system that ultimately needs to be reconfigured and retooled significantly if it's to be truly reflective of the kind of power dynamics that we're seeing in International Rugby League at the moment. But ultimately, I think a lot of the confusion and a lot of the seeming inaccuracy of these rankings will be rectified if we can get more international football. These lower tiered European nations are currently playing more regular season international football than Pacific nations, than Australia and New Zealand as well. Now, that's great for them and great for the game, but it's not great for the rankings if this is how they're to be continued to be determined moving forward.